Hey everybody, it's Taki117 back with StarQuest. Here we are sitting on the launch pad with our recently redesigned satellite launch vehicle. We're going to go ahead and start the countdown. Set up for orbital insertion. And ignition and liftoff. I completely redesigned this rocket from practically the ground up. So, it appears that my guidance computer is still not working properly. I think it has something to do with either the fuel tank I'm using or the engine I'm using. But I can use, as I mentioned in a previous episode, the mission elapse timer in the upper left-hand corner, along with the calculated burn time provided to me by my Delta V readout, to sort of get a decent estimate as to how much fuel I have left. Sending quite nicely here. I would like to point out that the video has been pre-recorded and I am narrating on top of that. So this is not a live recording. I ran into an issue with my preferred recording software and had to use an alternate, which did not record my microphone. So this space program has been plagued with problems. Most of them are my fault. A large majority of them are my fault. Quite a few poor rocket designs. Here we can see me starting my gravity turn as we look up the eastern seaboard, Florida. Yep. And my guidance computer is still not working. You got the moon there. And the reason the moon looks so small from here instead of the large moon that we're used to seeing is because Earth's atmosphere acts as a magnifying glass. Now, of course, when you're standing on the surface, you see the big moon, especially when it's near the horizon, it's really big. But unfortunately, the game can't model that. And it's just a limitation of the game engine. So it cannot model that atmospheric magnification, so we're stuck with the small moon. That's an interesting view there. You have the sun setting as my rocket is increasing in altitude. See me pitching over here. I am flying this rocket manually at this point, trying to compensate. Now, I haven't figured out yet if it's the engine or it's the fuel tank. I believe it's the fuel tank. Main reasoning for that is once I drop that first stage, everything starts working again, and I don't understand why. Here we are. We're at 10 kilometers. We are heading for the moon, it looks like. This is one of my lunar probes. Just based on the target indicator there. And a lot of you watching are probably very familiar with why rockets are shaped the way they are. And some of you may not be. And the reason for that comes down to physics and aerodynamics. A rocket is what's known as a reverse pendulum. And also, it's pointed very much like a bullet because of aerodynamics helps cut down on gravity losses. But anyway, back to the reverse pendulum. The reverse pendulum, you have your normal pendulum, you hold it by the string and the weight's at the bottom and you swing it goes back and forth and it's very stable. A reverse pendulum is inherently unstable. It's like taking your pendulum and flipping it upside down, so all your weight's on top. Unfortunately, that doesn't lend itself well to stability. However, what it does do for us is a small change at the bottom results in a large change up top, which means that our rockets become inherently stable by virtue of them being unstable. I know that makes absolutely no sense, but I have my engine. My engine is the one doing the guiding. Ooh, it looks like I'm getting into some trouble here with overheating and ablation, but this is very likely just a visual effect. Nope, definitely overheating. As I push my rocket further and faster. But yes, the reverse pendulum allows a small change at the bottom to create a large change at the top, so that we can keep our rocket pointed in roughly the correct direction. I will also like to point out, I'm not entirely sure if this narration will play video audio as well, so I don't know if you're going to get all of the sound bites from this overheating. Ooh, I'm getting dangerously close to overheating. And something just exploded. Oh dear. Oh, that's never good. If things are exploding on your rocket, that is not a good thing. I've forgotten what's happening here. Oh, more things are exploding. We are way off course. I believe my rocket has separated. It has separated, yes. I do still have my second stage, I believe. Kind of hard to tell from what I'm seeing here. Yes, I do still have my second stage attached. So I can at least try to make orbit once my first stage burns out. So while this one is not necessarily going to be able to go to the moon, it can still at least act as a communications satellite. As you can see, my first stage there is still burning its fuel. I have no way to shut that engine down because, it's the two halves have separated. I cannot control that first stage. So it's just kind of pushing me wherever it wants. And as long as I stay above 70 kilometers, as long as my apoapsis is above 70 kilometers, I'm fine. It will eventually burn out. And I will be able to at least make orbit, even if I can't carry on to the moon. Now, I'm mildly curious why it's spinning like it is. Oh, there we go. Finally burned out. It's starting to fall away. And we're going to set up for our orbital insertion here. Try to save as much of this mission as I can. Deploy my solar panels. I really need to set those up on an action group. Just hit a single button, deploy them all, call it good. just haven't yet. I also need to put more satellites around the moon, so I have increased communication, as we will find out later. But you can see I do have a small transfer stage here, and it is designed to get this craft to the moon. And once I drop my first stage, my guidance computer does start working again. Sort of. The debris back there, that's what's left of our first stage. So this mission wasn't a complete loss, just most of a loss. And here we are getting set up for a burn. As the sun sinks below the horizon back there. I do activate my antenna. That was an interesting blip there. I believe that was a result of us going to warp. I do activate my antenna to get increased range out of it. While stowed, it has a range of 500 kilometers. While extended, it has a range of, I would say, 2.5 megameters. The Milky Way back there is perform our orbital insertion. Unfortunately, this means I no longer have enough fuel to get to the moon. So, fortunately, however, on the other hand, this was a flight anomaly, not a design anomaly. So, a little less aggressive on my gravity turn. Maybe wait a little longer to start it. Yeah, a couple different things I can do. Because something I've noticed is gravity turns are unique to the rocket, even if you are using the same rocket. Virtually every rocket is different. Every payload is different. So, even if you're using the same rocket that you normally do, but you have a different payload, your gravity turn is going to be different. And here you can see me setting up a Hohmann transfer to the moon and realizing, well, one, I'm completely out of sync with it. I launched it completely the wrong time. That my orbit is completely wrong. And there's nothing I can do. I fiddle faff with the maneuver mode node a little bit, trying to get an intercept, but it just doesn't work. I am completely out of alignment with the plane of the moon. So this mission is scrubbed. I do eventually scrub this mission. I do point it radial out, and what this does is, as I rotate around the day side of the planet, my solar panels, because they're fixed, will catch more and more sunlight, charging my batteries on the day side, and I believe I have enough to survive the night on the night side as well. Another way around this is I could have boosted into a higher orbit, reducing the amount of time I stay on the night side, and just turn off my smart stability assistance system. Or my smart augmented stability system. And, you know, I take this opportunity to do some science, because I do have all this science on board, so there's no point in wasting it. This is actually great for those science around the Earth contracts. But this mission is scrubbed, so let's take a look at the follow-up mission. And here we are. This is our Atlas Agena rocket. Now, the Agena spacecraft was the target spacecraft for the Gemini missions. So you had Gemini 6 and 7 that performed a rendezvous in space, and then you had Gemini 8 that actually did a docking in space. Gemini 8 used the Agena target vehicle, which is really nothing more than a long tube with a docking port on one end, to dock with. They performed some experiments. They did 3 or 4 Gemini missions. But the first thing they had to do was get the Agena up there. And they used the Atlas rocket with some modifications. And the Atlas rocket was the rocket that put the first American in orbit. You know, you had Mercury Atlas, which was an Atlas missile with a Mercury capsule on top. And launch. Now, this rocket really boogies. Unfortunately, I think there is an issue with the drag cube on the bottom of the rocket. Because as soon as I start pitching, doing my maneuvers, I immediately lose control. See, I flip, I cut my engines to try and recover, back around. I do recover a little bit, but at this point it's too little too late. I cut my engines again. Now, of course, NASA didn't actually have this problem. They have hundreds of thousands of engineers and scientists and people. I do drop that skirt, which is what the actual Atlas rocket did. It was known as a stage and a half to orbit because it did have those 2 booster engines on it that it did drop at some point during the flight. But yeah, it doesn't work at all. You see, I tell it to point up in an effort to try and salvage what I can. By pointing my rocket downwards, or the engine towards the ground, I can try and land this. I start pointing surface velocity negative, because now I'm trying to land. I'm trying to recover as much of this rocket as I can. I am slowing down quite a bit, and this surprises me. I save about 90% of this rocket. I lose, my main engine and my 2 Werner engines, but I save the payload, the fairing, the fuel tanks, everything. And I was not expecting to save very much of this rocket at all, and I end up saving most of it. So I completely redesigned my Agena launch vehicle, completely from the ground up, different fairing, different everything. So let's see how our Kerbals do as I get set up here. We are go flight. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Main engine start. Ignition and liftoff. And as you can see, and I think it's at this point I determined that my guidance computer issues are due to the fuel tank, not the engine. Because this is the same engine I used on my previous launch when I was having issues. And as you can see, this one is doing much, much better. Pitching over quite nicely. And I think what I'm going to do is revisit the Atlas launch vehicle when I get automatic ascent guidance. And that's simply because I have a feeling that, you know, an automatic ascent would help quite nicely. Here we are, we're ascending. Ascending very nicely. Already at 6.5, almost 7 kilometers. We're at 7 kilometers now. Traveling at Mach, I can't really read that. Probably close to Mach 1 at this point. Or actually probably close to Mach 2 or 3 at this point. But I really like the way the plumes expand. And the reason for that is a decrease in atmospheric pressure as you go up through the atmosphere. You know, as you ascend, there's less pressure pushing on the plume, which allows it to expand more, which actually gives you more power overall if your engine is designed that way. You know, if it's designed as an upper stage engine, like this one is, your engine bell tends to be larger. For those of you that watch the SpaceX launches, you can see that in the Merlin 1D engine that they use on their second stage. That engine bell is much larger than the ones they use on their first stage because it's designed for a low pressure environment. You can see the plume here. It's expanded now. Switch to orbit prograde. I'm still undergoing re-entry effects, which is fine on ascent. It is altitude based, not speed based. And here we have an upper altitude flip. The reason for that is my engines are providing primary guidance control. There we go. Release our payload. Or release our fairings rather. But yes, this upper altitude or upper atmosphere flip is my engines are providing most of my steering, most of my control authority, and I cut them. So aerodynamics takes over, and there we go, releasing the payload. And I forgot something very important up until, you know, and that is this spacecraft has built-in RCS thrusters. Now, of course, I don't actually lose this spacecraft. See, because I do activate the thrusters, but at one point I forgot that it had them, which is why one of my satellites using this probe core could have survived its mission. I scrubbed that mission a little too soon. I did not realize that it had those RCS ports on it, and I could have used those to straighten it out. Here we are, we're making orbit, and there it is, there's the Agena target vehicle. So one of the first target vehicles, I forget which one, actually had a problem with its fairing. If you get a chance, just look up the angry alligator. It's a rather amusing space story. Yeah, we are in orbit. Oop, chasing that maneuver node a little bit. Anyway, that's all for this episode. I'm Taki117, and remember, well, things happen, stuff explodes, and as always, it's only rocket science.